I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 34, and last Sunday I sat across from my sister Rebecca at Lucille, Manhattan's trendiest brunch spot. Crystal champagne flutes clinked while she loudly mocked my clearance rack blazer and dead-end career to our entire family. Rebecca glowed while bragging about her executive position at Luminary Enterprises. I gripped my napkin under the table, forcing back tears, thinking about the irony she couldn't see. 3 months ago, I secretly purchased Luminary Enterprises. My sister had no idea that her paycheck now required my signature. After years of her cruelty, perhaps it was finally time she learned who I really am. Before I dive into this wild journey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with a family member who underestimated you. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Growing up in our affluent Boston suburb, I learned early that I would always be second best. Our colonial-style home on Maple Avenue housed 4 people but really only celebrated 3. Rebecca, 3 years my senior, commanded attention everywhere she went with her natural beauty, outgoing personality, and seemingly effortless achievements. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Rebecca was homecoming queen, valedictorian, and captain of the debate team. I was, well, Rebecca's quieter sister. My report cards full of A's barely received a glance, while Rebecca's mixed grades were celebrated because she was so busy with her many activities. The disparity between us crystallized when college decisions arrived. My parents funded Rebecca's full ride to Cornell housing, expenses, even a new car. When I got accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship, my father's response was swift. "We've already stretched our education budget with Rebecca. You'll need to consider state schools or student loans." I worked my way through State University, holding down 2 jobs while maintaining a 4 gigapascals in business administration. Meanwhile, Rebecca partied through Cornell, changing majors 3 times before settling on communications. Still, my parents sent her additional funds whenever she called with emergencies. My interest in business emerged early. While other kids ran lemonade stands, I created a neighborhood service network, connecting local teens with elderly residents who needed help with chores. By 15, I'd saved enough to make my first small stock investment. Rebecca mocked my spreadsheets and financial journals, calling me the boring sister. My parents laughed along. The first real betrayal came during my sophomore year of college. I developed a comprehensive business plan for a campus service app that would connect students with resources. I excitedly shared my idea with Rebecca during Thanksgiving break, showing her my meticulous research and projections. 3 months later, I discovered she'd pitched my exact concept to her entrepreneurship professor, claiming it as her own. She won the department's Innovation Award and $5,000 in seed funding. When I confronted her, she shrugged it off. "You were just going to keep it in those little notebooks anyway. I actually did something with it." My parents thought I was being petty for being upset. Family gatherings became battlegrounds where Rebecca would subtly undermine me. "Cassandra's still finding herself. She'd tell relatives while I worked 80-hour weeks building my skills. It's cute how she thinks spreadsheets will make her successful." Her backhanded compliments always came with an audience. "I admire how Cassie doesn't care about appearances," she'd say while eyeing my practical wardrobe, purchased on a strict budget. Then came my grandmother's passing 3 years ago. While the bulk of her modest estate went to my parents, she left me something unexpected, her investment portfolio worth $75,000. "She always worried about you making it," my mother said, somehow making my grandmother's belief in me sound like pity. What nobody knew was that Grandma Martha had been quietly mentoring me for years. She recognized something in me that my parents never did: a mind for business and determined spirit that reminded her of herself. While small by wealthy standards, that inheritance became the foundation that would change everything. I promised myself that I would make it grow, not just for me, but to honor her belief in me. Throughout it all, I maintained a facade with my family. They saw what they expected: a moderately successful, perpetually overshadowed younger daughter. They never asked about my work in detail, so they never learned how far I had actually come. And after years of their dismissal, I stopped volunteering information. Rebecca continued her pattern of casual cruelty, completely unaware that with each cutting remark, she was cementing my resolution to succeed on my own terms and eventually show them all just how wrong they'd been about Cassandra Mitchell. My rise in the business world wasn't meteoric, it was methodical. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a financial consulting firm. The salary was modest, but the learning opportunities were invaluable. I lived in a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, saving nearly 70% of my income and investing strategically. While my colleagues splurged on happy hours and designer clothes, I attended every free workshop, webinar, and networking event I could find. That's where I met Jason Williams, a venture capitalist with a reputation for spotting diamonds in the rough. At a crowded industry mixer, I overheard him discussing a problem with a potential investment. Without thinking, I interjected with a solution. He turned, surprised, and said, "That's exactly what they need. Who are you?" Jason became my mentor, impressed by my analytical skills and work ethic. "You have a gift for seeing value where others don't," he told me, after I identified a promising startup that his firm eventually invested in. The finder's fee from that deal alone doubled my net worth overnight. By 28, I had created a diverse investment portfolio and was making strategic angel investments in female-led startups. I maintained a deliberately low profile, never appearing in press releases or standing in front photos. My name was known in select circles, but my face remained largely anonymous, exactly how I wanted it. This anonymity became even more important when Rebecca entered the corporate world. She landed a series of increasingly visible marketing positions, each one accompanied by exaggerated stories about her responsibilities and influence. At family gatherings, she'd drop names of executives and celebrities she claimed to know. I'd smile politely, never mentioning that several of those same executives had sought my investment in their ventures. The second profound betrayal came when Rebecca began dating Tom Calloway, a financial analyst I'd been seeing for 6 months. I hadn't introduced him to my family yet. I was cautious with my personal life after years of Rebecca's interference. But she met him at an industry event, and when he mentioned knowing me, something shifted in her expression. "Oh, you're dating my sister?" she'd said, according to Tom's later recounting. "How sweet. She's always struggled with relationships. Our family worries about her being so intense about her work." What followed was textbook Rebecca. She began texting him constantly, positioning herself as the concerned sister. She invited him to lunch to talk about Cassie, then began sharing embarrassing childhood stories and expressing worries about my unhealthy relationship with money and inability to connect emotionally. 3 weeks later, Tom broke things off with me. "I just feel like there might be some family issues you need to work through," he said awkwardly. 2 days after that, Rebecca casually mentioned having dinner with him. Just as friends, she assured me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They dated for 2 months before she lost interest and moved on, leaving both of us damaged in her wake. The heartbreak was real, but it hardened my resolve. I channeled my pain into work, expanding my investment strategy and taking bigger risks that yielded bigger rewards. I moved into a beautiful penthouse apartment in a doorman building, but never hosted family there, meeting them instead at restaurants or my parents' home. By 30, I had established Mitchell Ventures, a private investment firm operating under a complex corporate structure that obscured my position as founder and CEO. On paper, I was simply a financial consultant at a mid-sized company, the story I shared with my family when they occasionally remembered to ask. When the opportunity to acquire Luminary Enterprises appeared, I initially hesitated. The digital marketing and corporate consulting firm wasn't in my usual investment sphere, but their client list and proprietary analytics tools showed tremendous untapped potential. Their leadership had grown complacent, and they needed fresh direction. The acquisition was complex and kept quiet standard for my business dealings, I maintained the existing CEO, Derek Thompson, an experienced executive who respected my vision but didn't know my personal background. I operated as a silent owner, reviewing performance metrics remotely and joining key meetings via conference calls. Then came the email from HR about new executive hires, with a familiar name jumping off the screen: Rebecca Mitchell, hired as Director of Client Relations. My sister had applied to one of my companies completely by coincidence, having no idea of my connection. My first impulse was to call Derek and veto the hire, but curiosity stopped me. Here was a unique opportunity to see my sister's professional persona unfiltered. Did she work as hard as she claimed? Was she as brilliant as my parents always believed? Part of me hoped she would prove herself capable, perhaps even impressive. I approved her hire without revealing our connection, watching from a distance as she settled into a role that, on paper, she was qualified for. I instructed HR to treat her like any other executive, no special treatment, no extra scrutiny. For a few weeks, I simply observed. But then came that fateful Sunday brunch where Rebecca's mockery pushed me to the edge of revelation. As I sat there, champagne turning sour in my stomach, I realized this unique situation had presented me with a choice: continue my anonymous success, or finally step into the light and show my family, especially Rebecca, who I had become while they weren't paying attention. The Sunday brunch at Lucille had been my mother's idea. "It's been too long since we all got together," she insisted, though we'd had dinner just 3 weeks prior. What she meant, I knew, was that Rebecca was available, and therefore we should all adjust our schedules accordingly. I arrived precisely on time, dressed in a navy blazer, silk blouse, and tailored pants, conservative but quality pieces that comprised my usual business casual attire. Nothing flashy, but certainly not clearance rack as Rebecca would later claim. My watch, a Patek Philippe, worth more than Rebecca's monthly salary, remained mostly hidden under my sleeve, my only indulgence visible to those who knew what to look for. Rebecca arrived 20 minutes late in a flurry of air kisses and designer labels, my parents beaming as though royalty had descended. My brother-in-law Michael trailed behind her looking tired, their twin toddlers mercifully left with a nanny. "Cassie, you look so sensible," Rebecca announced as she air-kissed my cheek, her eyes scanning my outfit with barely disguised judgment. "That blazer is holding up well. Didn't you wear it to Dad's birthday last year?" "Good to see you too, Rebecca," I replied, maintaining the pleasant mask I'd perfected over decades. The first hour passed in Rebecca's monologue about her recent promotion at Luminary. I sipped my mimosa quietly, knowing the truth: she hadn't been promoted, but laterally moved to prevent her termination after complaints about her management style. "The CEO practically begged me to take on the client relations portfolio," she boasted. I bit back a smile, remembering Derek's actual words in our last call. "We're trying her in a role with less team management. Hopefully she works out somewhere." My father leaned forward, enraptured. "Princess, we always knew you were destined for big things." Speaking of work, my mother turned to me with her typical afterthought interest. "How's your job going? Still at that finance place?" Before I could answer, Rebecca interjected. "Mom, don't bore everyone with Cassie's spreadsheets. Trust me, it's mind-numbing stuff." "Actually," I began. "Oh, you should see my office," Rebecca steamrolled over me. "Corner space, floor-to-ceiling windows. They know talent when they see it." I took a slow breath. Her office was actually a standard executive space identical to 15 others on the same floor. I'd seen the floor plan during the acquisition. "Cassie, seriously," she continued, gesturing at my blazer. "You need to let me take you shopping. You'll never move up looking like an accountant from 2010. Don't you want to eventually attract a man who doesn't carry a calculator?" My brother-in-law Michael winced slightly. My mother tittered nervously while my father chuckled, both pretending this was just sisters being sisters. "I'm comfortable with my style," I replied evenly. "Comfortable? Exactly the problem." Rebecca laughed loudly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Comfortable is for retirement homes, not career women. But I guess in your position, There's not much point in impressing anyone. My father attempted a weak intervention. Now, Becky, your sister works hard. At what, though? Rebecca pressed, sensing vulnerability and moving in like a shark. She's been doing the same middle management number crunching forever. Some of us actually have ambition. The irony might have been funny if it hadn't cut so deep. While Rebecca had bounced between 5 companies in 8 years, I'd built a corporate empire valued at over $200 million. The number crunching she dismissed had yielded investment returns that would make Wall Street veterans envious. You know, Rebecca continued, warming to her subject, my assistant makes about what you do, Cassie. You should apply. Luminary's a fantastic company. Of course, you'd need to upgrade. She gestured vaguely at all of me. Everything. But I could put in a good word. My mimosa glass froze halfway to my lips. Her assistant made 6 figures, a salary I'd personally approved as fair compensation for a demanding role. Rebecca had no idea she'd just compared my supposed income to a sum I considered pocket change. For a moment, I considered setting my glass down and calmly informing the table that not only could I buy and sell Luminary Enterprises several times over, but that I literally signed off on the company's quarterly profit distributions. The look on Rebecca's face might almost be worth breaking my carefully constructed privacy. My phone buzzed a text from Jason, my mentor. How's the Lion's Den today? He was one of the few people who knew my full story, family dynamics included. The reminder of my real world, the one where I was respected, valued, and understood, helped me regain perspective. This wasn't the time or place for revelations. I should probably get going, I said, gathering my things as Rebecca launched into a story about the celebrity client she'd supposedly charmed last week. Work emergency. No one questioned it. My work had always been dismissible, forgettable. On a Sunday? God, that's depressing, Rebecca remarked, but I guess someone has to do the grunt work while the rest of us make the big decisions. As I stood to leave, dropping cash for my portion, despite my father's distracted, I've got it, Cassie. Rebecca couldn't resist a parting shot. Don't work too hard, sis. Those spreadsheets will still be there tomorrow. Unlike my inbox being needed is such a burden. I smiled tightly, a plan already forming in my mind. Enjoy your afternoon, Rebecca. I have a feeling your inbox is about to get much fuller. She didn't even notice the edge in my voice, already turned back to her captive audience, holding court in a kingdom built on exaggerations and borrowed glory. Walking out of Le Ciel into the bright Manhattan afternoon, I made a decision. After years of Rebecca's casual cruelty, perhaps it was time for a reality check delivered through the very company she was using to bolster her fragile ego. The ride back to my Tribeca penthouse gave me time to cool down. The doorman greeted me by name as I entered the marble lobby, a stark contrast to the cramped Brooklyn walk-up my family assumed I lived in. I'd never corrected their assumption, one of many misunderstandings I'd allowed to persist over the years. Upstairs, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of Macallan 25, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the Manhattan skyline. This was my real-world 3,000 square feet of success my family had never seen and wouldn't have believed possible. My phone rang. Alicia Kim, my best friend since college, and now my company's chief legal counsel, displayed on the screen. Please tell me you finally told them, she said without preamble. Not exactly. I recounted the brunch disaster, Rebecca's mockery, and my hasty exit. Cass, this is ridiculous. You're letting her walk all over you when you literally own the company she works for. It's like watching Superman pretend Clark Kent can't lift a grocery bag. It's complicated, I sighed. It's not. She's a bully, and now you have leverage. Use it. I hesitated. I don't want to abuse my position. There's a difference between abuse of power and establishing consequences, Alicia countered. Remember when she tried to poach me from your first company? That had been betrayal number 3. 2 years ago, when I launched my first visible venture, a financial technology platform, Rebecca had somehow discovered Alicia worked there. Despite having no connections in fintech, She'd called Alicia with a too-good-to-be-true job offer, clearly hoping to undermine my fledgling business. Alicia had immediately reported the suspicious approach. She didn't even know I was involved with the company, I reminded Alicia. She just wanted to hurt an anonymous founder, which makes it worse. She's built her entire career on undermining others. Maybe it's time she experienced what accountability feels like. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and accessed Luminary's secure server, reviewing Rebecca's personnel file. What I found wasn't surprising, but still disappointing. Mediocre performance reviews, complaints from team members about credit stealing, and a pattern of exaggerating accomplishments. She'd been placed on a 90-day improvement plan just before my acquisition, a fact conveniently omitted from her Brunch boasting. More disturbing was the client feedback. Rebecca presented well in initial meetings, but failed to deliver results, often blaming her team when projects went sideways. Several valuable clients had requested different account managers. I arranged a video call with Derek Thompson, Luminary's CEO, making sure to display a neutral hotel background rather than my penthouse. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted me formally. We maintained professional distance in all interactions, my preference as a private investor. "Derek, I've been reviewing the executive team's performance metrics." I kept my tone casual. "I'm particularly interested in our Director of Client Relations." His expression tightened slightly. "Rebecca Mitchell. Yes, she's energetic. Her numbers don't reflect that energy. She interviews extraordinarily well," he said diplomatically. "Very charismatic. But between us, the results haven't matched her self-assessment. We've had some client retention issues in her portfolio. I'd like to implement a special evaluation project for her department," I said, outlining a comprehensive client satisfaction initiative that would require Rebecca to personally handle account reviews for all major clients, a significant increase in her workload and accountability. "That's quite demanding," Derek noted. "Any particular reason for this focus?" I maintained my professional demeanor. Let's call it investor interest in maximizing return on executive salaries. After the call, I sat with my decision. Was I crossing an ethical line by targeting my sister? Maybe, but everything I'd proposed was legitimate business practice increasing accountability for an underperforming executive. Rebecca wouldn't be treated unfairly, just held to the standard she claimed to exceed. To ensure objectivity, I established clear metrics for the project with Derek and the HR director, neither of whom knew my connection to Rebecca. The initiative would apply to Rebecca's entire department, though as director, she would bear the heaviest responsibility. I set up remote access to monitor the project's implementation, a standard procedure for my investments, but now with personal significance. Through this system, I could review Rebecca's work submissions, client feedback, and team communications without direct involvement. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from Rebecca. "Some corporate idiot just dumped a mountain of busywork on my department. Going to be working late all week, totally beneath my position. Drinks next weekend to hear about my suffering? You can share your spreadsheet adventures, LOL." I stared at the message, struck by her ability to immediately deflect responsibility while simultaneously dismissing my career. I typed a non-committal response about checking my schedule, then set my phone aside. The plan was in motion. No firing, no public humiliation, just simple professional accountability. If Rebecca was as talented as she claimed, she'd rise to the challenge. If not, well, reality can be its own form of justice. The special evaluation project launched on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, my phone was already buzzing with texts from Rebecca. "This new project is insane. Some investor with a microscope up their ass is making everyone jump through hoops." I replied with appropriately sympathetic but generic responses, knowing full well I was the investor in question. Throughout the week, Rebecca's complaints escalated. "They want daily reports. From a director. Don't they know who I am?" Actually, I thought to myself, I know exactly who you are. That's precisely why the reports were necessary. Wednesday evening, My mother called to inform me of a last-minute family dinner on Friday. Rebecca's having such a hard time at work. She needs family support, she explained. I agreed to attend, curious to hear how my sister would characterize the situation in person. Meanwhile, I monitored Rebecca's work submissions through Luminary's management system. Her first reports were rushed and superficial, clearly delegated to her team while she took credit. I flagged this to Derek, who implemented my suggestion that all submissions include detailed breakdowns of individual contributions. When Friday's dinner arrived, Rebecca was 30 minutes late, dramatically dropping into her chair at my parents' dining table with a theatrical sigh. "You would not believe my week," she announced, without greeting anyone. "Some investor is on a power trip, and everyone's panicking." She launched into a highly embellished version of events, casting herself as the put-upon executive, valiantly managing unreasonable demands. "I'm practically running that company single-handed now," she declared, fork-waving for emphasis. "The CEO calls me for advice constantly." I nearly choked on my wine. According to the communication logs I'd reviewed that morning, Derek had indeed called Rebecca to discuss her incomplete client assessments and missing team reports. "That sounds challenging," I offered mildly. "How are your clients responding to the reviews?" Rebecca waved dismissively. "Oh, they love me. That's not the issue. It's all this unnecessary paperwork taking me away from relationship building." What she didn't mention, but I knew from the system logs, was that 3 major clients had expressed concerns about account neglect during their mandatory reviews. "Maybe the investor has legitimate concerns about performance metrics?" I suggested. Rebecca snorted. "Please. It's just some Wall Street type who's never worked a day in real business throwing their weight around." She turned to our father. "Daddy, I might need to borrow a little money this month. All this extra work means I had to cancel a paid speaking engagement." I bit my tongue, knowing no such engagement existed. Our father immediately reached for his wallet. "Of course, princess, whatever you need." "Cassandra could help too," my mother suggested. "You're always so careful with money, dear." "She needs more than my careful pennies, Mom," I replied, the irony almost choking me. "Obviously," Rebecca smirked. "But I'll take whatever pathetic contribution you can spare, Cassie. Maybe skip your sad little coffee shop visits for a week?" And there it was, betrayal number 4, hiding in plain sight. For months, Rebecca had been feeding our family a narrative about my sad life, my pathetic budget, my little coffee shop visits as my only indulgence. She'd been actively crafting an image of me as struggling and small, not because she believed it, but because it made her shine brighter in comparison. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to compose myself. While washing my hands, I checked my phone to find an urgent email from Luminary's HR director. Rebecca had submitted a team project for client presentation, claiming primary authorship. However, metadata analysis showed the document had been created and primarily developed by her assistant, Zoe, with Rebecca making only minor edits in the final hours before submission. This was a clear violation of company policy on intellectual honesty and proper attribution, a fireable offense under normal circumstances. The HR director was seeking guidance on how to proceed given Rebecca's executive status. I returned to the table with new resolve, watching Rebecca hold court with stories of her office minions and their incompetence. Every word reinforced what the data had shown. My sister was not the business powerhouse she pretended to be. She was a careful curator of appearances, taking credit for others' work while deflecting blame for failures. Later that night, I responded to HR's inquiry with clear instructions. Document the incident thoroughly, but take no action yet. Rebecca would have one opportunity to correct the attribution before consequences would be implemented. I was giving her a chance to display integrity, something she had rarely shown in our personal relationship. By Sunday evening, my monitoring dashboard showed Rebecca had made no corrections to the document attribution. Instead, she'd sent increasingly frantic messages to her team about the upcoming client presentation, placing immense pressure on them to perfect her work. As I prepared for bed, A call came in from Jason, my mentor. "How's the Rebecca situation?" he asked after pleasantries. I sighed. Worse than I thought. She's not just exaggerating her accomplishments, she's actively stealing work from her subordinates. And what are you going to do about it? I don't know. Part of me wants to reveal myself as owner and watch her face when she realizes who she's been mocking all these years. Would that solve anything? Jason asked quietly. It would feel good, I admitted. For about 5 minutes, then what? His question hung in the air between us. Then what indeed? Would exposing Rebecca heal decades of hurt? Would it make her a better person, or just a more careful one? And what would it make me? Think carefully, Cassandra, Jason advised before hanging up. You built your success on smart business decisions, not emotional ones. Don't change your strategy now. I went to sleep with his words echoing in my mind, still uncertain whether accountability or revelation would be my next move. But events were accelerating toward a confrontation that would soon force my hand. The following Tuesday, Rebecca called me in tears. "I need a loan, Cassie. Seriously. $10,000. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Why? This project is destroying me. I had to push back our Hamptons rental deposit, and if I lose it, Michael will kill me. We've already invited all his law firm partners. Rebecca, that's a lot of money. Money I could easily provide, but that wasn't the point. God, you're so cheap. It's just until my performance bonus comes through. I knew from Luminary's financial projections that bonuses were being reevaluated due to a disappointing quarter. Rebecca was counting on money that likely wouldn't materialize. I'm sorry, but I can't right now. It was time Rebecca faced some financial reality. Her response was immediate and vicious. Fine. Stay in your little budget life with your little budget dreams. Some of us have actual reputations to maintain. When I didn't engage with her tantrum, Rebecca escalated to our parents. That evening, my mother called, her voice tight with disapproval. "Cassandra, your sister needs help. Family supports family. Mom, $10,000 isn't support, it's enabling. You've always been jealous of her success," my mother sighed. "Your father and I raised you better than this petty behavior." The unfairness stung, but I held firm. The next day, my father called with a similar message, though his approach was more direct. "Your sister is under tremendous pressure at work. Don't add to her stress over a few dollars." A few dollars. The casual dismissal of a sum that represented weeks of work for most people illustrated perfectly how my parents enabled Rebecca's financial irresponsibility while diminishing my boundaries. While this family drama played out, Rebecca's professional situation deteriorated. The client presentation featuring her assistant's uncredited work had gone poorly, with the client asking technical questions Rebecca couldn't answer. According to internal reports, she'd blamed technical difficulties and her team's inadequate briefing. That Thursday, I decided to visit Luminary's offices incognito, something I occasionally did with my investments to get a feel for company culture. Wearing glasses I didn't need and my hair styled differently, I posed as a consultant meeting with the HR department, situated strategically near Rebecca's office. What I witnessed disturbed me. Rebecca arrived late, immediately summoned her assistant for coffee, then spent 30 minutes on personal calls while her team scrambled to prepare for a client meeting. When one brave team member questioned a strategy decision, Rebecca cut her down publicly. "When you have director in your title, you can make these calls. Until then, just do what I tell you." The client meeting itself was painful to observe from my discreet position in an adjacent conference room. Rebecca presented confidently, but with little substance, deflecting detailed questions to her team while taking credit for their insights. When the client seemed unimpressed with projected outcomes, Rebecca blamed corporate constraints and investor meddling, indirectly criticizing policies I had implemented. That afternoon, CEO Derek Thompson requested an urgent call. "We have a situation with the client relations department," he began formally. "Director Mitchell's performance isn't improving despite the additional oversight. In fact, team morale is plummeting, and 2 valuable team members have requested transfers." What does she say when confronted with the metrics? I asked, already knowing the answer. That's just it, she insists her performance is exceptional and the metrics are flawed. She's proposed a major restructuring of her department that would essentially remove the accountability measures while expanding her authority. I reviewed Rebecca's proposal on my tablet during our conversation. It was breathtakingly self-serving a framework that would give her more control while reducing measurable deliverables. There's something else, Derek continued hesitantly. She's been telling clients that the recent operational changes were her initiatives, taking credit for the very accountability measures she's struggling to meet. My sister's audacity was almost admirable. Even drowning professionally, she was still trying to manipulate perceptions to her advantage. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, I told Derek. Please continue with the established protocols. No exceptions for executive status. That weekend, another family gathering became the stage for Rebecca's growing desperation. This time, a birthday celebration for my father brought extended family together at my parents' home. Rebecca arrived visibly stressed, dark circles under her eyes poorly concealed with makeup. Throughout dinner, she picked at her food and checked her phone constantly. When conversation turned to work, she launched into an increasingly frantic monologue about corporate politics and jealous colleagues undermining her. There's a conspiracy to push me out, she declared, wine sloshing dangerously in her gesturing hand. Someone at the top has it in for me. I'm sure that's not true, honey, my mother soothed. Who wouldn't value your contributions? The blind faith in my sister's narrative was so familiar it almost didn't hurt anymore. Almost. Maybe, I suggested carefully. The performance expectations are reasonable. And, of course you would say that, Rebecca snapped, eyes flashing. You've always wanted to see me fail. You and your pathetic jealousy. Our cousin Julia intervened. Becky, that's not fair. Cassandra's just trying to help. Stay out of this, Rebecca hissed. None of you understand the pressure I'm under. There's someone pulling strings behind the scenes, I know it. Some faceless investor playing puppet master. The irony of her accusation so close to the truth, yet so far from recognizing it, almost made me laugh. Instead, I excused myself from the table, stepping onto the patio for fresh air. My Aunt Catherine followed me outside. Don't let her get to you, dear. Rebecca's always been intense. I'm fine, I assured her. You know, she continued, studying me thoughtfully, you remind me so much of your grandmother. She was underestimated too, but she built something real while everyone was looking elsewhere. Her perceptiveness startled me. Had Aunt Catherine somehow guessed at my success? Before I could respond, shouting erupted from inside. We rushed back to find Rebecca in full meltdown mode, tears streaming down her face as she accused our family of never supporting her properly. Everyone expects perfection from me. Everyone takes and takes, she pointed at me accusingly. Especially Cassie, always playing the victim while secretly sabotaging me. This new accusation, betrayal number 5, left me speechless. Rebecca had flipped our entire history, casting herself as my victim rather than the other way around. Rebecca, that's enough, my father said firmly, finally intervening after years of enabling her behavior. You don't understand what I'm dealing with, she sobbed before storming out, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Later that night, I received a call from Alicia. Just check the luminary reports, she said without preamble. Rebecca's throwing her entire team under the bus in writing. She's named 3 people specifically for performance issues that are clearly her own failures. Can you send me the documentation? Already did. Cass, this isn't just bad management anymore. She's actively damaging people's careers to save herself. After reviewing the reports, I made my decision. It was time to end the charade, not for revenge, but for the protection of innocent employees caught in Rebecca's desperate flailing. I scheduled an emergency department review for Monday morning at Luminary, instructing Derek to ensure Rebecca and her entire team would be present. For the first time in my professional life, I would step into a Luminary meeting not as an anonymous investor, but as Cassandra Mitchell, majority owner, and the puppet master my sister so feared. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I worked closely with Alicia to ensure everything was legally sound, reviewed all of Rebecca's performance documentation, and planned my approach carefully. This wasn't about humiliation, it was about accountability and protection of luminary employees. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of texts from Rebecca. Emergency meeting called at work. CEO being super weird about it. Pretty sure I'm getting promoted. Why else the secrecy and full department attendance? Wear something decent tonight, we'll celebrate my VP announcement. Her complete misreading of the situation would have been amusing if it weren't so delusional. I didn't respond, focusing instead on my own preparations for the meeting. I arrived at Luminary's offices 30 minutes early, entering through the executive entrance where few would recognize me. Derek Thompson met me in his office, visibly nervous about the confrontation to come. "Are you sure this is the best approach?" he asked. "It's unconventional for an owner to intervene so directly." "Sometimes conventional approaches aren't effective," I replied, reviewing the meeting agenda once more. "Is everyone assembled?" "Yes. The client relations team is in the main conference room. Miss Mitchell Rebecca is making quite a scene about why she's been called in with her subordinates." At precisely 10 a.m., we entered the conference room. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, a position she wasn't entitled to but had naturally assumed. Her team members sat tensely around her, eyes downcast, the body language of people who had been berated recently. Rebecca's eyes widened in confusion when she saw me. "Cassie, what are you doing here?" Her glance shot to Derek. "Is this some kind of joke?" Derek cleared his throat. "Team, most of you haven't met Miss Cassandra Mitchell personally. She is the majority owner of Luminary Enterprises and has been since our acquisition 3 months ago." The room fell silent. Rebecca's expressions cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and the beginnings of comprehension. "That's not possible," she finally sputtered. "My sister works at some finance company. She's a number cruncher, a nobody." I set my portfolio on the table, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the personal attack. "I'm CEO of Mitchell Ventures, a private investment firm that acquired controlling interest in Luminary Enterprises approximately 14 weeks ago. I've been operating as a silent owner to observe operations without influencing day-to-day management." Rebecca's face drained of color. "This is a prank. It has to be." I turned to address the room, ignoring her outburst. "I've called this meeting to address serious concerns about management practices in the client relations department. My involvement became necessary when documentation revealed potential ethical violations. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the issues professionally: the misattribution of work, the blame shifting, the misrepresentation to clients, all without once mentioning my personal connection to Rebecca. Her team members gradually straightened in their chairs, exchanging glances as their experiences were validated by someone in authority. Rebecca sat frozen, her expression shifting between shock and rage as the reality of her situation became undeniable. When I finished my presentation, she finally exploded. "You did this on purpose," she shouted, standing so abruptly her chair crashed backward. "You bought my company to sabotage me. This entire evaluation project was a setup. The company was acquired before you were hired," I stated calmly. "Your employment was coincidental." "Bullshit! You've always been jealous of me, always lurking in the background, waiting for me to fail," Derek intervened. "Miss Mitchell Rebecca, please maintain professional composure." "Professional composure?" She laughed wildly. "My sister has been spying on me for months. This entire company is compromised." I addressed the team. "I apologize for this unprofessional display. Please return to your desks. HR will schedule individual meetings to discuss department restructuring." As the team filed out, visibly relieved to escape the tension, I turned to Rebecca. "My office. Now." In the privacy of the executive suite I maintained but rarely used, Rebecca's rage transformed to pleading. "Cassie, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. I've been dealing with impossible expectations." "The same expectations applied to all directors," I replied evenly. Why didn't you tell me you owned the company? Why let me take the job at all? I didn't know you'd applied until after you were hired. By then, I was curious to see how you actually performed professionally. Her expression hardened. So this was a test? Another way to prove you're better than me? No, Rebecca. This was business. Your performance would have triggered this exact response regardless of our relationship. Our relationship, she repeated bitterly. You mean the one where you've apparently been lying about your entire life? Playing poor little Cassie while secretly being what, a millionaire? I never lied. I simply didn't correct assumptions that no one bothered to question. Rebecca paced the office, running calculations behind her eyes. Wait, how long have you been doing this? How much are you worth? Of course, that would be her first question. Not how I'd built my success, or why I'd kept it private, but how much financial power I wielded. That's not relevant to this discussion. It's completely relevant. You've been hiding this, making me look like a fool. Your behavior made you look foolish, Rebecca. Not my success. Her strategy shifted instantly, tears welling up. I didn't know, Cassie. How could I have known? I've been struggling so hard trying to prove myself. You have to give me another chance. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost disappointing. This isn't about chances, it's about consequences. Your position at Luminary is being reevaluated based on documented performance issues. You're firing me? Your own sister? I haven't made that decision yet. Rebecca's tears vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this. Neither will the rest of the family. Is that a threat? It's reality. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, or the sister who's been lying to everyone for years? Within hours, my phone exploded with family messages. Rebecca had wasted no time spinning a victim narrative. I was a secretive, jealous sister who had elaborately plotted her downfall, buying her company specifically to humiliate her. According to Rebecca's story, she had been excelling until I implemented impossible standards targeted specifically at her. My mother's voicemail was particularly painful. How could you embarrass your sister this way? After everything we've done for you, everything they'd done for me. The irony was almost too much to bear. That evening, Rebecca made her final betrayal attempt, the sixth and most desperate. She sent an email to Luminary's board of directors and key investors, alleging that I had engaged in unethical targeting of employees for personal vendettas and misuse of company resources for surveillance. She threatened to take her story to business publications if not given a fair settlement package. What she didn't know was that my acquisition agreement included robust protection clauses and that all board members had been fully briefed on the situation as soon as her performance issues were documented. Her reckless email accomplished the opposite of her intentions. It removed any lingering doubt about whether she deserved a second chance. By attempting to damage my professional reputation and extort the company, Rebecca had sealed her own fate. After Rebecca's attempted power play with the board, I knew a controlled professional resolution was necessary. Working with Alicia, Derek, and Luminary's HR director, we developed a comprehensive approach to address both the business and personal dimensions of the situation. First, I scheduled a formal department meeting for Wednesday morning. All client relations staff would attend, alongside executive leadership and HR representatives. The purpose: transparent communication about department restructuring and leadership changes. Second, I arranged a private family meeting for Wednesday evening at my penthouse, a location none of them had ever seen. It was time to end the dual life I'd been leading and address decades of familial misconceptions. By Tuesday evening, Rebecca had shifted strategies again, now presenting herself as the wounded party seeking reconciliation. Her text messages oscillated between veiled threats and appeals to sisterly loyalty. "We can work this out without lawyers, right? Family first." Then, an hour later, "My friend at the WSJ would love the story of how you abused your position to target me." Her transparent manipulations only strengthened my resolve. This cycle of toxicity needed to end, one way or another. Wednesday morning arrived with a sense of finality. I dressed with particular care in a tailored Chanel suit, no more downplaying my success. When I entered Luminary's conference room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Rebecca sat rigidly in her chair, eyes darting nervously between faces. The rest of the department maintained careful distances from her, their allegiance already shifted in the wake of Monday's revelations. I began the meeting professionally, focusing on restructuring rather than individual failures. The Client Relations Department will be reorganized effective immediately to better serve our objectives of transparency and collaborative success. I outlined the new structure, which distributed Rebecca's former responsibilities among 3 team leaders who had demonstrated competence and integrity throughout the evaluation process. Rebecca's assistant Zoe, whose work had been repeatedly claimed by my sister, would lead client communications. As for director leadership, I continued, feeling Rebecca's glare intensifying, we're implementing a mentorship model. Rebecca Mitchell will be reassigned as associate director, reporting to Diane Foster, who joins us from our Atlanta office. Rebecca's gasp was audible. Diane Foster was a formidable executive in her 50s, with a reputation for demanding excellence while developing talent. She was also a woman who had built her career from nothing, someone who could potentially mentor Rebecca toward authentic achievement if my sister was willing to learn. This isn't a demotion, I clarified, though it effectively was. It's an opportunity for guided professional development with quarterly performance reviews. The alternative termination remained unspoken but understood. I was offering Rebecca one final chance, not because she deserved it, but because I hoped some version of sisterly relationship might eventually be salvageable. When the meeting concluded, Rebecca cornered me in the hallway, her voice a harsh whisper. Associate director? Under some old woman from Atlanta? I won't do it. That's your choice, I replied calmly. Standard severance is 3 months' salary. Her eyes widened at the paltry figure, far less than she'd hoped to extract. You know I can make this ugly. You've already tried. The board has my complete confidence, and your email threatening exposure was forwarded to legal yesterday. Think carefully about your next move. For once, calculation replaced impulse in her expression. This isn't over. Actually, it is. 7 o'clock tonight, 180 Riverside Boulevard, Penthouse, B. Bring our parents. It's time everyone heard the full story. The remainder of the day passed in focused preparation. I instructed my housekeeper to prepare a simple but elegant dinner. I gathered financial documentation spanning my career, photographs of business achievements carefully excluded from family knowledge, and awards received but never mentioned. At 6:45, I stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows watching the Hudson River reflect the setting sun, feeling strangely calm. The buzzer rang at 6:58, my punctual father's influence, no doubt. Their expressions as they entered my penthouse would have been comical under different circumstances. My mother's eyes catalogued the obvious luxury with disbelief. My father seemed unable to process how his struggling younger daughter could possibly afford such an address. Rebecca's face showed only calculation, already adjusting her understanding of my financial status and what it might mean for her. "Welcome to my home," I said simply, leading them into the living area where I'd arranged drinks and appetizers. "After 34 years, I thought it was time you saw how I actually live." "How can you afford this?" my mother blurted, social graces overwhelmed by shock. "I'm successful, Mom, extremely successful. I have been for years." "But you never said anything," my father interjected, looking around at artwork worth more than his house. "You never asked," I replied. "You assumed I was struggling because that fit the narrative you'd created. Successful Rebecca, ordinary Cassandra." "So what? This is some kind of ambush." "A look how rich I am party," Rebecca snapped, defensive aggression her default response. "No, it's the end of pretending. For all of us." I gestured toward the dining room. "Let's talk over dinner." The meal passed in tense conversation as I methodically dismantled decades of family mythology. I explained my business trajectory, showing photographs and documentation at key points: my first major investment success, the founding of my company, acquisitions including Luminary. My net worth currently exceeds $200 million, I stated matter-of-factly, watching my father's fork freeze halfway to his mouth. I employ over 500 people across my companies. The number-crunching job you've dismissed for years, Rebecca, was running my investment firm. Why would you hide this? My mother demanded, looking almost betrayed. I didn't hide it. I simply stopped volunteering information when it became clear no one was interested. When was the last time any of you asked detailed questions about my work, my life? Uncomfortable silence confirmed my point. Rebecca, I continued, turning to my sister, you've spent years mocking my career, my apartment, my clothes, all while I signed the checks that paid your salary. You could have told me, she muttered, defensive. Would it have changed how you treated me? Be honest. She couldn't meet my eyes. The pattern started long before Luminary, I continued. Remember my business app idea in college? The one you stole and presented as your own? My parents exchanged confused glances. Or Tom Calloway? The man I was dating until you deliberately sabotaged the relationship? That's ancient history, Rebecca dismissed. It's a pattern, I corrected. One that continued at Luminary when you claimed Zoe's work as your own and blamed your team for your failures. My father cleared his throat. Cassandra, whatever issues you girls have, there's no need to be vindictive about Rebecca's job. The familiar defense of Rebecca sparked something in me. Dad, this isn't about sibling rivalry. Rebecca was put on probation before I even knew she worked at Luminary. Her performance was objectively substandard, according to metrics that apply to every executive. I turned to Rebecca. I've arranged a second chance for you, a legitimate opportunity to develop actual skills under Diane's mentorship. Whether you take it is your choice. But the days of facades are over. Rebecca stared at her plate, uncharacteristically quiet. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, decades of family dynamics crumbling around her. My father looked lost, his clear categories of successful daughter and ordinary daughter irreparably blurred. I don't expect tonight to fix everything, I said more gently, but I needed you all to see the truth about my life and about the dynamics we've created together. As they prepared to leave, visibly overwhelmed by revelations they were still processing, I handed Rebecca a card. Diane expects you at 9 a.m. tomorrow if you're accepting the position. She's tough, but fair, probably the best mentor you could ask for if you're serious about genuine success. Rebecca took the card silently, her usual armor of bravado notably absent. After they left, I poured myself a glass of wine and returned to the window, watching city lights shimmer across the river. For the first time in decades, I felt unburdened. The path forward remained uncertain, but at least it would be built on truth rather than comfortable fictions. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. I'll be there at 9. It wasn't an apology or a promise of changed behavior, but it was perhaps a start. 6 months passed with remarkable swiftness. Autumn gave way to winter, then to spring's tentative warmth. In that time, more changed within my family than in the previous decade. The transition wasn't smooth or instantaneous. The first weeks after my revelation were awkward, with stilted phone calls from my parents and near silence from Rebecca. Old patterns don't dissolve overnight, especially when they've been reinforced for 30-plus years. Rebecca did show up for her first day with Diane, though I suspected financial necessity rather than personal growth motivated her decision. Initial reports were mixed. Rebecca struggled with the reduced status and accountability requirements, bristling under Diane's no-nonsense mentorship. Your sister has potential, Diane told me during our monthly check-in, but she's spent so long faking competence that she's afraid to admit what she doesn't know. That makes her nearly impossible to teach. I kept my distance professionally, making it clear to both Diane and Rebecca that there would be no special treatment, positive or negative, due to our relationship. Rebecca would succeed or fail based entirely on her own performance. At family gatherings, a strange new dynamic emerged. My parents oscillated between awkward pride in my previously unknown achievements and lingering resentment that I'd deceived them for so long. The cognitive dissonance of reconciling their struggling daughter with my actual success seemed almost physically painful for them. "We just don't understand why you felt you couldn't tell us," my mother repeated during a tense Sunday dinner, 3 weeks after the revelation. "I tried, Mom, for years. But you and Dad were so focused on Rebecca's trajectory that mine never seemed to register." "That's not fair," my father protested weakly. "Isn't it? When I made my first million at 29, I mentioned expanding my investment portfolio. You changed the subject to Rebecca's new marketing job." They had no response to that, because we all recognized the truth in it. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Catherine, the same aunt who had compared me to my grandmother on the night of Rebecca's meltdown, invited me to lunch at her Manhattan apartment. "I've suspected for years," she confessed over salmon and white wine. "The way you carried yourself, the careful deflection when money was discussed. You reminded me so much of your grandmother." "You knew Grandma Martha was wealthy?" I asked, surprised. Catherine laughed. "Martha was worth millions when she died, dear. The modest inheritance you received was just the portion she knew you'd use wisely without drawing family attention." This revelation stunned me. I'd built my empire thinking I was forging a new path, never realizing I was following familial footsteps carefully hidden from view. "Your grandfather was like your father, focused on appearances, social standing. Martha built her investments quietly, letting him believe their comfortable life came primarily from his income. She recognized the same pattern repeating with you and Rebecca. Why didn't she tell me? Would you have believed her at 22? Or would you have felt burdened by the comparison?" Catherine smiled sadly. "Martha chose to give you tools instead of expectations. The small inheritance was meant to be a starting point, not a revelation." This conversation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of my family history. I wasn't an anomaly. I was a continuation. The pattern of underestimated Mitchell women ran deeper than I'd known. Armed with this new perspective, I approached the ongoing family reconciliation differently. Rather than seeking validation or acknowledgement of past hurts, I focused on building new patterns of interaction based on authenticity. With my parents, this meant gentle but firm correction when they slipped into old habits. When my mother commented that Rebecca was having a difficult adjustment period at work, I simply replied, "We all face professional challenges. I'm sure she'll find her way just as I did." The comparison was subtle but important, a reminder that both daughters deserved similar support and expectations. My father struggled more openly with the new dynamic. His identity had been partially built around being Rebecca's champion and my practical advisor. With those roles obsolete, he seemed lost. I made a point of asking his advice on matters where his experience was genuinely valuable: home maintenance, navigating certain social situations, while establishing clear boundaries around my business and financial decisions. As for Rebecca, her journey proved more complicated and nuanced than I'd anticipated. The first 3 months under Diane's mentorship were rocky, with multiple near resignations and tearful calls to our parents. But something unexpected happened. Around month 4, she began to improve. Diane's monthly reports showed measurable progress in client retention, team management, and project completion. Most surprisingly, Rebecca had begun properly attributing team contributions and sharing credit for successes. "She's developing actual skills," Diane noted with mild surprise. "When she stops performing and starts working, she's quite capable." Rebecca and I maintained professional distance at Luminary, but slowly established a new pattern of occasional dinners, just the two of us, away from parental influence. Our conversations remained somewhat superficial at first, but gradually developed more substance. During one such dinner in early spring, Rebecca surprised me with an unexpected confession. "I've been seeing a therapist," she announced abruptly over appetizers. "Since about a month after everything happened." "That's good," I replied neutrally, unsure where this was heading. She pushed her food around her plate. "She thinks I have something called imposter syndrome, like on steroids." "That makes sense." Rebecca looked up sharply. "You're not surprised?" "Rebecca, You've spent your entire life creating an image of success without building the foundation to support it. That's textbook imposter syndrome. I thought you just thought I was lazy and entitled. Sometimes you acted that way, I acknowledged. But I always sensed there was fear underneath it. Fear that if you actually tried and failed, everyone would see through the facade. Her eyes welled with tears, genuine ones, not the tactical kind I'd seen so often before. How did you do it? Build something real while everyone was watching Rebecca's show? I stopped needing their validation, I said simply, and started working for my own satisfaction instead. That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Not immediate reconciliation, too much history lay between us for that, but the beginning of something resembling mutual respect. Today marks exactly 6 months since the revelation dinner at my penthouse. We're gathered at a different upscale brunch spot, my choice this time. A table strategically selected to parallel that fateful day when Rebecca's mockery pushed me to action. The external similarities are striking: mimosas and crystal flutes, elegant table settings, our family arranged around premium breakfast fare. But the atmosphere couldn't be more different. My parents still occasionally slip into old patterns, but catch themselves more quickly. My father asks thoughtful questions about my latest business ventures, making genuine efforts to understand my world. My mother has stopped making comparisons between her daughters, addressing each of us individually rather than as a comparative set. Rebecca arrives last. Some habits die hard, but without the grand entrance of 6 months ago. She's changed, subtly but significantly. Her designer clothes remain, but the desperate edge to her self-presentation has softened. She's built a solid performance record under Diane's mentorship, earning a lateral move to a department better suited to her actual strengths rather than her imagined ones. "Sorry I'm late," she says, sliding into her seat without drama. Client call ran long. "How's the Westridge account?" I ask, referencing a challenging client she's managed to retain despite initial difficulties. Instead of exaggeration or deflection, Rebecca gives a measured response. "Rocky. Their expectations are high, but we're making progress." She hesitates, then adds something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. "Actually, I could use some advice on their contract structure if you have time this week." The request, professional, straightforward, acknowledging my expertise, represents more healing than a dozen emotional conversations could have achieved. "Of course," I reply. "Tuesday afternoon?" As brunch progresses, I observe my family with clear eyes. We're not perfect. Recovery from decades of dysfunctional patterns doesn't happen in 6 months. My parents still occasionally beam more brightly at Rebecca's achievements. Rebecca still carries the sharpness that once manifested as cruelty. I still maintain certain walls built during years of emotional self-protection. But we're trying, speaking truths instead of comfortable fictions, building relationships based on who we actually are, not who we pretend to be. When the check arrives, I catch Rebecca studying me with an expression I've rarely seen from her thoughtfulness uncolored by competition. "What?" I ask. "I just realized something," she says quietly. "I spent my whole life trying to be exceptional through shortcuts and appearances. You actually became exceptional by putting in the work." It's not quite an apology for years of mockery and sabotage, but from Rebecca, this acknowledgement of reality and the implicit acknowledgement of her own past failures feels like a significant step forward. "We all have different paths," I reply, neither minimizing her observation nor rubbing it in. As we leave the restaurant into the bright spring morning, I reflect on the journey from last year's brunch to today's. The woman who sat burning with humiliation and secret power is gone, replaced by someone who no longer needs either shadows or revenge. The healing isn't complete, may never be fully complete, but it's genuine and ongoing. The family walking beside me isn't perfect, but they're real. And after 34 years of facades, reality, however complicated, feels like the truest form of success. I hope my story has resonated with those of you who've experienced family dynamics where you've been underestimated or overlooked. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between revenge and growth? What did you choose? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences. If you found value in this journey, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that success is the best revenge, but healing is the ultimate victory. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the person signing the paychecks isn't who you expect them to be.